Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live and interactive webinar educational series. Today, we'll be discussing the changing landscape of water submetering. We'll also be examining the principles and methods of properly specifying and applying submeters within the requirements of Senate Bill number 7. This new law requires water meters and submeters to be installed in apartments in multifamily dwellings constructed after January 1st of 2018. Today's presenter is Don Milstein. He is the president of H2O Degree. Don is a well-established industry professional and is the chairman of the Utility Management and Conservation Association. He is a well-recognized speaker in the energy industry and has been published in over 40 trade magazines. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Don. Thank you again for attending and have a great rest of your afternoon.
All right, Ashley, appreciate that intro. And again, my name is Don Milstein, president of H2O Degree, and been in the submetering industry since 1991. So just about everything I've seen. Really appreciate the time, especially during this epidemic, and appreciate taking some time out to get educated, and hopefully we can answer your questions. As we go, we have a few parts of this presentation where we will stop and answer questions. So presenting today will be myself. There's my contact information. Jerry Armstrong, our Vice President of Technical Sales and Services, is on the sidelines, able to answer any technical questions as we go through, and we'll bring them in as we need. And hopefully everyone registered and we can get to feed you when this is when this gets going. So appreciate your time again. Thank you very much. I really want to appreciate the efforts by Osborne and Company in bringing everyone together for this and all their support over the last few years. And they've been a great rep for us, representing us in Northern California and for many years to come. And again, like we said, we'll stop off and on, but at any time, please feel free to chat and we'll answer the questions. This presentation will be made available, so feel free to take notes as we go, but we will make this available. And we'll stop at a screen like this every 5 to 10 slides, just to give a question opportunity. So just real quick, what is H2O Degree? We focus on 4 major areas, one being tenant submetering. And when we say that, this is where a owner of a apartment building, a condo, co-op, or a commercial establishment, like a shopping mall or a strip center or an office building, want to bill their tenants for their actual utility usage, whether it's for water, electric, gas, BTU meters. We'll focus this presentation mainly on water, but obviously we'll address the electric and gas as we go. The second area we focus on is what we call leak detection and flood detection. And in this case, the owner is really concerned about the bills. He's paying the bill, he's not passing on to the tenants, wants to see if there's a broken flapper valve or a chain stuck in the water that's being wasted. So we have a whole monitoring system for that, and that really helps in getting them to conserve water throughout their property. Same concept for thermostats. We'll touch on that briefly, where we can control the thermostats as the owner, set the limits, and a huge energy savings. And just in general, you think about this overall presentation, it's about energy, water, electric, gas conservation. Ultimately, our customer, even though we're selling through distribution and going through contractors and working with the engineering community, our ultimate end user is the building owner, the property manager. And what is their goal? Their goal is to lower their costs, lower their usage of energy and water. And when they do that, if they put in the metering system and put in leak detection, they're going to save dollars. And those dollars could be, maybe we can save them $100,000 in their water bill a year. So that's how we, not only conserve the water, but we save them $100,000. And they do that by changing 2 behaviors. And those behaviors are the tenant's behavior. If we hold tenants accountable for their usage, obviously they're going to save, right? They're not going to take as many long showers. They're not going to flush the toilet every 5 minutes just by throwing a tissue in it, okay? And they'll look for leaks. At the same time, if we're billing them, it's a great revenue stream for the owner and moves that expense to the tenants. The other change of behavior is the owners themselves, the property owners. We want their maintenance staffs to be proactive. We want them to engage with contractors and say, hey, I have leaks in my property, come look at this. So we're really trying to make them proactive. And if we collectively do that as a group here, they'll save money, and that ultimately increases their profitability. And that profitability being their net operating income. And I only point that out because in real estate, it's pretty unique. If you save $100,000 in water costs, that increases your profit $100,000. They call that net operating income. But in real estate, that increases the property value about 10 times. So for every dollar they save, it's worth 10 times that. So we save them $100,000 in water usage, that increases the property to $1 million, by $1 million. So when they sell it, they're going to make more money, or they might be able to refinance or have more room on their line of credit based on the value of the property. So it's always a dynamic you want to keep in mind, and that's how your customers are thinking about tenant submetering and leak detection. So one of the highlights is really this whole submetering piece. And when we talk about that, when you hold tenants accountable, there's been lots of studies done. In particular, here's the National Apartment Association and Multi-Housing Council. They did studies that showed that if they build tenants for their usage, rather than just include it in rent, right, where they don't care about their usage, but actually bill them for their actual usage, they'll see 18 to 39% savings. EPA did a similar study. This was a little bit more on the commercial side and institutional, but the same thing, 10% savings. And then New York did a study through NYSERDA, found the same thing. And this study was very unique in that they did 200-unit apartment buildings right next to each other. Looked the exact same property, same owner. One building for a year, they didn't build the tenants. The other building, they did build the tenants. And the savings per tenant was anywhere from 10 to 26%. So you can see these are substantial numbers, right? We typically see if you're billing tenants for their usage, you're going to see a reduction of 20%. More importantly for the owner, it's a 1 to 2 year payback, and that's key. So H2O degree, really we look at our history since 2007. We were around before that, but really since 2007, well over 100,000 meters across the United States. We're close to 60-some thousand apartments at this point and 450 to 500 properties. And our customers are anywhere from the large real estate investment trusts that own 50 to 100,000 apartments like an Aimco or Greystar, Lennar, to the local property owner. You know, two guys get together, buy an apartment building, or these what are called private families, like LaFrac family owns 30, 40, 50,000 apartments. They're not a public company, just, you know, created a great avenue for wealth and own all these apartments. And our apartments range anywhere from, you know, the big properties, the 100,000 unit apartment complexes, to our average in the United States is 200 units per apartment. And we've done projects that are in the 25 unit range. When you get below that, it's a little harder on the economics, but people do it. So it's not like it can't be done. And the same holds true for commercial properties. Pretty decent range there. The key is how we go to market. We really support the plumbing channel through our manufacturer rep. Osborne Company does a great job for us with all their salespeople throughout the Northern California. We sell through distribution. We're supporting the engineers on any kind of specification and design work, doing takeoffs, you name it. Our staff is well equipped to do that internally. For water, electric, BTUs, thermostats, doesn't matter. You know, half the staff are ex-plumbers or building controls kind of guys, so we really understand everything you're seeing. We do a lot of training and work with the plumbing contractors and the wholesalers. And again, like we said, at the end of the day, it's the end users we need to educate. But the relationship with Osborne has been wonderful, and you know, collectively, we really support this channel in a big way. Another piece of water submetering and even electric meter is what is available for LEED credits. As you can see here, we listed WE stands for water efficiency, and you can get credits for water metering and leak detection overall reduction in different ways. And if you look more at the electric side and thermostat control, you get EA credits, which is energy and atmospheric credits, whether it's for submetering or leak detection, or submetering or thermostat control energy reduction. So keep that in mind. You go to our website, it's pretty well listed by number, and we'd be happy to assist you if you're looking at LEED credits. Again, when we talk about multifamily, and we'll use that term throughout, it's apartments, it's condos, it's student housing, it's low income, right? Might be a Section 8 housing, might be a LIHTC, a low income tax housing, or it might be a affordable housing units or housing authorities, right? Military housing, kind of all over the map. And now we're moving in the last year or two, moving into the commercial side, strip centers, shopping malls, office buildings, water, electric, all the different utilities. So that kind of gives you a quick intro. Wanted to talk about what is this word submetering? And we mentioned it before, but sub is sub of the utility meter. So think about a 100, 200 unit apartment building. You got one master meter coming from the utility in the pit, like you can see in the top right, 3 to 4 inch type meter, maybe more, feeding the whole building. And historically, the water utility said, thank you very much, Mr. Landlord, pay me for all my water. You figure out what you want to do with that and the tenant usage. So in the past, they might just include it in rent. They might allocate it based on some ratio, number of bedrooms, number of people living in the unit, square footage, or they go to submeter. If they're going to submeter, which is the most effective way to really get conservation and hold people accountable, they're going to put in little 3/4 inch pulse output meters, which we'll go in further detail, but that's that middle picture. The blue being a cold water meter, the hot meter being red. But you can also go down all the way down to individual toilet shower sinks with that meter at the bottom there. So we're going to talk about all these meters that we supply and talk to it all wirelessly. Makes a very unique system. So again, sub of the utility meter, and how do we go in there? And we'll touch on that a few times as we go through this. So again, when we talk about this process, we don't want to just include water and rent. It doesn't save anything. It doesn't conserve anything. There's a lot of wasted money. It's not the most efficient way. So ultimately, we're going to put in meters for each tenant. And now those meters are going to be read, download the information, and bill them each month. Truly the same amount that the landlord is being billed for the water. It's really not a profit center for them. It's a way to get that expense off of their books. And what we find, most of the owners actually hire a third party to do the billing. It's called a meter reading company, or RBC is the industry term. RBC stands for read, bill, and collect. Now, some have done it themselves, but truly they separate it from the rent bill. They get a rent statement goes to each tenant, and they might get a separate bill for the utilities, whether it's water or electric, it doesn't matter, and that's sent to each tenant. If you think about it, when you look at these third party, landlords already are at a little confrontational relationship with their tenants. Tenants don't trust them, so they really rather get a water bill from a third party. These third parties are large companies throughout the country, companies like Conservice, RealPage, Yardi. All they do is bill tenants for their usage on behalf of the landlord for a fee. And then you have a bunch of local ones. There's about 75 of these companies throughout the United States. Ashley mentioned this association called the Utility Management Conservation Association. It's made up of all these companies and the vendors of hardware throughout the country, and it tracks the regulations by state, by county, on what's allowed, what's not allowed for billing or just allocating costs. Very active in that association. I'm actually chairman of it, and that's how we were able to really present in detail about the rules in California, which is Senate Bill 7, which requires submetering. And we have several slides on that a little later in the presentation. So when we look at the first way a building is built, we call it single point of entry. And what does that mean? That means there's one meter for the whole building. Each apartment has its own individual hot water heater. So there's one pipe, cold water going into the apartment, feeds the hot water and tees off to the toilet shower sink. That's called single point of entry. And you just need one water meter for that, and you're off to the races. The other way buildings are built is a centrally heated water system. Okay? In those situations, you might be bringing one hot and one cold pipe to each apartment. We call that dual point of entry. In those situations, we're going to install one cold water meter, one hot water meter in each apartment. Okay? So at the high level, the two ways we call point of entry, single point, dual point, and then a little later we'll talk about what we call point of use. And that's a situation where there's risers, where all the toilets are on one riser, all the showers on another riser. And we'll go over that a little bit later. When you think of this point of entry concept, we pretty much have a certain numbers of meters we use. In California, all the meters have to be certified to the state of California and then be approved by the Bureau of Weights and Measures in California. So everything we sell are approved pulse output meters. One meter might be the one on the left. It's called a WM1000. That is a plastic water meter, right? Which has one pulse per gallon. And what's nice about that meter, the top part flexes the hose, so it can be horizontal or vertical with the face staying the same way. On the right side is another very popular series. We call it the WM 1100. One is for hot, one is for cold. So if we want a nice matching set and you're doing dual point of entry, a great solution. All these meters and everything we talk about ties into a wireless network. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we call it the L54230. That's our wireless pulse counter. So every meter has a pulse output. That's a little wire coming off of it on the right-hand side there. We'll then attach to that black box. That black box stores it and has a radio in it and a battery. Communicates throughout the property. We'll show a diagram of that a little later, but at the end of the day, that is what you're looking at in the apartment. 1 meter, maybe 2 meters, depending on the single point or dual point, back into that pulse counter. Those pulse counters have single channel and dual channel. In California, it's really the only state that requires this, that says all meters must be installed at, or at least have a display installed at ADA level of 4 feet. So if the meter is up in the ceiling, you have to run a wire down to these remote displays. And these displays be mounted at 4 feet level ADA compliance. So that's called the RDU 1000. Fortunate for you, you're in California, or I should say unfortunate, it's the only regulation state that has this requirement to have a remote display. And it's really to protect the tenants so they can see it. Not that any tenant has ever looked at the water meter, but it's there for that usage. So that's the point of entry. So the next area is what we call point of use submeter. And this is where you really have a riser type environment for the building, where all the toilets are on one riser, all the showers on another riser for hot, another riser for the cold, another one for the kitchen, hot and cold. So you can't use those traditional pulse output meters. So we sell a little meter like this that can go underneath the toilet, underneath the sink, behind the shower head. And we'll talk about this meter for point of use, but we also do it for leak detection because we can get very granular information from it. All right? So that's called point of use. That's the third way buildings are plumbed in the United States. And when we look at that type of meter, it's a really compact all-in-one unit where the beige is that little flow sensor is the little darker beige piece in the center there. Underneath that, the white area houses the meter reading board, as well as the wireless radio and a battery. Those other pulse output meters strictly give you gallons, you know, as far as information, but it also gives you the ability to look at it and see with the wireless the time. With this type of meter, we also get events, meaning every time water stop starts. So we're getting the gallons, we're getting the time it's been running. You actually can get the temperature of the water to see if the mixing valves are an issue there. But we get what we call events, events being water stop starts, and in particular, toilet flushes. So now we can look at the gallons and the events and see, do we have a leak? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's really one of the key features of this type of meter, again, for leak detection and point of use submeter. This just shows a little bigger picture of how these could get installed. So with that, let's take a break, see if there's any questions on the chat or anything.
Yes, there was a couple of questions, Don,
Sure.
we answered them, but I figure I'll bring them up. One of the questions was, is there other types of leak detection products available from you, i.e. for fuel, oil, or gas? We answered the question, but I figured I'd allow you to elaborate on that one.
Sure. So today, everything we do is based on water. So we'll show you towards the end the leak detection and flood detection, which is actual leakage on the floor. So we have sensors for on the floor leaks as well as down the drain. We don't do anything for gas or anything like that. No other liquids or gas at this point.
And then there was another question asking us to explain more about the wireless network and how the meters communicate and how the data is read.
Sure.
I know that's going to be definitely in the PowerPoint presentation.
Right.
And
Yeah,
you can elaborate later on.
Yeah, we'll hold that off to a little bit later. There's a nice diagram and we'll go through that. This way, kind of bring it all together. So appreciate that. All right. Any other questions?
Not for right now. Continue on.
All right. Sounds good. So let's talk about California Senate Bill 7. This is the bill that came out in 2018 and has specific submeter requirements for California. Signed in 16, and basically what it says January 1st, 2018, if you're building a brand new apartment building, multi-housing unit of any type, typically over 4 units or above, you must sub-meter the tenants. It's no longer acceptable in California that you can allocate costs based on square footage, number of bedrooms. You no longer can just include water and rent. In the past, it's been allowed, and it was at the option of the owner which way they wanted to go. With this Senate bill, it was because of all the, the water issues you're having in California. They said, no, this is a good conservation method. 20, 30% of the population in California lives in multifamily, and there was no regulations there. So they implemented this to hold tenants accountable for usage, knowing that they'll save. This is unique in some ways. Most of the country gives the people the option. There is a few states, Texas and Georgia actually have a similar type of requirement that you must sub-meter going forward. It's not for retrofit. Retrofit is up to the owner what they want to do, but new construction, California have to. And I think this is something we're going to see across the country. It has a few key points to the law. One is hardware requirements. And this is what we mentioned before, that the meters must be tested in Sacramento by what's called the Bureau of Weights and Measures. They test the meter, make sure it's approved. And if it's approved, it gets its seal and off you go. And that's the meter that has to be used every time. There are certain restrictions on how much an owner can charge the tenants for the fee to do the metering. So in addition to charging them for the actual usage, they can get, $4.75 or some percentage of the water bill for that service of putting in the equipment, the payback on the equipment, as well as the recurring fee by these third parties to do the billing. Kind of unique feature in the ruling says that if a leak is identified by the tenant, talked about, gave a notice to the management team has 21 days to react and go in and fix those leaks. And if they don't fix the leak in 21 days, then their bill gets limited to $15. So average water bill for an apartment typically is about $50, give or take, $50 to $65. So if they can't fix it, it's lost revenue to them. If they don't fix it within 180 days, they can't charge for the water. So you can see we're trying to change, the law is trying to change behavior of the landlords and get them aligned with the tenants. A lot on this page, like I said, you'll be getting this, but it doesn't change the fact that in retrofit, you can still allocate costs. You just can't do it on new construction. Some facilities are exempted from this rule. So this is a very key piece, right? Healthcare facilities, low-income housing, you don't have to build a tenants, it's up to you. College and university type, houses of education, elderly care, and timeshare. So specific exemptions, just want to keep that in mind. But for the most part, you can say all market rate apartments, okay, where they're going to be actually charging them rent at full value, must be sub-metered. Installation, we'll go into this a little bit of what type of person must install it. It's very critical in California that it's done by a licensed contractor in the state. And you can see, they look at must have graduated from the California State Program and then have a journeyman on staff. But they also have to be registered as a service agency. And we have a slide on that in a second. Again, this was probably a bigger deal before when the permits, the timing of the permits was pretty critical. And it said that if a permit was done prior to January 1st, 2018, even though the billing didn't start, it was grandfathered in. But now any permits after January 1st, 2018 must provide for sub-metering. So the requirements, we start off with a California approved meter, without a doubt. And that's, CTEP is California tests, and then CDFA is the agency under California that does this. What's unique about California is that pretty much everywhere else in the country, if someone wants to buy 200 water meters, we'll go ahead, manufacture them and then ship it to the contractor, through our distribution or whatever channel we're using. Gets through to the contractor and they go install it. California says, no, We want every one of those meters to go to one of our local county test stations. Right? So each county has a meter test facility, Division of Weights and Measures. And at that facility, they're going to take 10% of the meters and test them for accuracy. Okay? Now, what's interesting here is that person testing that meter is well qualified, expert at water, because yesterday he was at a grocery store testing deli meat scales. And the day before that, he was at a gasoline station looking at the gas meter. So you can see there's a little bit of an issue here, right? There's a lot of issues getting it through the test station. They are backed up a lot of times. Their goal is something in the 2-week frame. No doubt it takes 2 to 4 at a minimum. There's a lot of counties that are well over 8 weeks. So this is a major point when you look at a project, that you know it has to go through this testing, be random tested. You got to provide time for that. And this has been a challenge. And we've been able to work through this challenge. We've been able to figure out which counties are best to do the work before they seal the meters. And what we ultimately did is we worked with Osborne, and they said, look, let's make a commitment here to this market. And we got meters pre-approved by the county, sitting in the warehouses at Osborne in Livermore. So you already have pre-tested meters there, and then the rest is just paperwork. So H2O Degree, working with Osborne, provides all the paperwork associated with this. There is a fee that the county charges, so that's an $8 fee, so that gets part of the billing. And we make sure we provide all the resources to make this seamless as possible to get the meters delivered to the job site.
Hey, Don, sorry to interrupt. We also have numerous people attending from Nevada as well.
Okay.
So if you can speak to Nevada and the weights and measurement requirements in Nevada as well.
Congratulations. In Nevada, there is no requirement such as this. Pretty much across the country, the requirement says, provide a meter that meets an accuracy standard equivalent to the American Water Works Association, AWWA, which is plus or minus 1.5%. So every meter we sell meets that, and that's exactly what California is testing for accuracy. The second requirement is for safety, so all the meters are NSF approved. Other than that, from what I understand, Nevada does not have any other requirements. I believe Nevada does allow, and I can check this later, does allow allocation, which we call RUBS, ratio utility billing. So you can either allocate costs included in rent or put in some meters, much different than California, which says new construction must put in some meters and up to you for retrofit. So hopefully that answers that question. Again, just to repeat one more time, the contractors have to be a licensed contractor, as we mentioned before. They must be registered as a service agency. Pretty simple, $35 fee. If you can't afford it, Ashley, I'm sure will front you the money, not a problem. And it's a 2-hour online test. Our team has been through it. Jerry Armstrong is on the call with me from our tech department. He went through that test very easily. We can help support you if you have any questions on that. No fear there, not a problem. And that's really what the whole deal is in California. All the meters have to be installed within requirements and be approved meters. But the big piece here is now Osborne is stocking meters so we can help shorten that lead time, or at least get you enough meters to get going on the job if the counties are behind. All right. So the next area, hopefully that answered all your questions. We'll stop again. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, we have another one, and I believe we're touching on it, but just want to make sure at the end. Question about incorporating the water submeters and hot water recirculation in a building. So if you don't have that towards the end, or we can't get to it, if we can, answer that or elaborate at the end of the presentation, that would be great.
Yeah. What we can do is we can either bring Jerry on for that question right now, or if it's easier at the end. I don't know if you can unmute Jerry's mic for that.
No, we cannot. We'll have to wait till the end.
Okay, sounds good. All right, we'll deal with that at the end. All right, so the
Don,
next section.
can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Jerry, is that you?
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
So you heard the question. If you could address that real quick.
Yeah. So in a domestic hot water recirculation system, ultimately what we would be doing is called shadow metering. So there's an example where you have 3 entries into a particular residential unit, So you would have domestic cold water, domestic hot water supply, and then domestic hot water return. So there we would have a meter on the domestic hot water supply measuring total gallons flowing into that apartment unit. And then we would have a third meter on the return. So we would measure gallons consumed through the return, and in software, we would net out what the return gallons have been against the supply, which ultimately would net the actual hot water consumption.
So it's basically a 3-meter solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that would have to be a 3-meter solution.
Okay. But all those calculations would be done, and then when the meter reading company or the property owner gets it, they're just getting one read of consumption. So they don't have to calculate
Yep.
on their end. So
That is
that's
correct.
important.
Yeah. So
Makes it
we're
easy.
doing that in the hardware on the front end, and then doing it in software. And the stakeholders or billing companies, they're only getting that net number, that consumption number that's attributed to what they're going to bill.
All right.
And can you elaborate on calculating the gas consumption?
On calculating the gas consumption in this particular instance where you're netting out the return?
They
didn't elaborate. Yes.
I think you mean just, like Jerry, think about if it's essentially heated system,
is this,
they want to charge for the gas
I see.
for that. Yep.
I think, how would you calculate gas consumption? Yes. So this would be, from a central plant.
Yep.
So this is, I think, in turns to the BTU metering. Would that be correct? I'm just waiting on the attendee to kind of answer that.
Well, just go with that. That's the most popular way.
Yeah, so so that would be the BTU meter, right? So in the BTU meter, we're directly measuring the consumed BTUs, and those BTUs can be turned into therms and or CCF, right? So it's going to be actually the consumed energy inside that apartment unit, and then that's where you would be able to ultimately bill out against the gas expense from the central plant and what it took to generate that hot water that's serving both for domestic hot water and for hydronic heating.
So just one more time to clarify. So what we would do is put a meter on the central plant looking at the gas consumption, and then have a meter, a BTU meter in each apartment, or we might be able, this a little, not sure, we might be able to do it with a runtime through a thermostat to tell how much is being called into that apartment for hot water. And now you can allocate costs of that central plant for heating into by apartment usage, right? Rather than just an allocation, it's actual metering of that. All right. And obviously we can follow up offline at any time to get further detail on that. All right, any other questions, Ashley? If not, we'll move on.
There are, but we'll let you move on, and then we'll
Okay.
ask the question during the slides that are in the presentation.
No problem. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on to leak detection and flood detection. One thing you want to keep in mind when we talk about apartments, this is really one of the focus for this presentation, 40% of the usage in an apartment is with the toilet. A shower and tub kind of gets you another 40%. If you do kitchen hot, you get another close to 10%. So with those couple points, you got over 90% of the usage. So that's really where we focus if we're looking at a billing property where it has all these different points of use. Excuse me. But if we're looking at leak detection, we focus on the toilet. Not only is it the biggest usage, but 70% of the leaking water in an apartment comes from the toilet. So toilets are king in our world. Like we said, 40%, 70%, 70% of leaks are from toilets. And that's coming from the flapper. It's coming from a cracked fill valve. It's coming from the chain being stuck. All these things. And our system will report that to the maintenance team and tell them really, through identification, what is causing it. And each apartment, we're actually looking at it by serial number, by apartment, by size, and report that out by largest leaks or the biggest, longest that they've been on the report to kind of prioritize where the maintenance team should go after or the plumbing contractor should go after to help the owner. So how do we do that? Because we're counting gallons and events every time water stop starts, we'll use the toilet as the best example. Normal 1 bedroom, toilet flushes 10 times. We call that 10 events, and we expect it to be 1.5 gallons each time. Well, sometimes we see 20 events. Maybe they had a party, maybe they had a bad burrito the night before. Not our problem. That's not a leak. That's a 1-day usage. But other times we see 100 events, 0.3 gallons each event. And that's a flapper valve going every time. We put that on our list as a leak. Other times we only see 1 event, maybe 2 events, but lots of usage for a long period of time. Constant running water. Crack fill valve, change stuff. That's a different leak. Identify it differently. This way the maintenance team knows what they're up against and grabs the right equipment to go fix it. The challenging one is where you have, we talked about before, 20 events, but it happened one night. All right, bad day. But when we see 20 events every day for a week or 2 weeks, that goes on a different report. We call that over occupancy. We expect the average apartment, 1 bedroom, 2 people living there. It is roughly 70 gallons a day is what we're looking for. 10 events. When we see 20 events and higher usage, it might mean we have grandma, grandpa, and a couple of cousins living in the same apartment. Or it's a student housing where they have 3 commuters living in the apartment, violating the lease. So it's kind of interesting. Some owners use the metering as a proxy for occupancy and then go change that. So that kind of gives you at a high level the leak detection. We send out daily reports to the property manager. Nobody wants a email or a text every time a broken flapper valve, right? So we send out these reports. They can go to the web portal at any time to see this, and really gives an interactive way to get this reporting and get it done. And it's all ranked by the usage and how high it is, as well as how long it's been on the report. This way the property manager can hold the maintenance people accountable. Hey, it's been a leak. We've been reporting it for 3 weeks. How come you haven't fixed it? All right? We actually have, and sometimes these reports, the property owner says, I don't have the maintenance staff to do this. And they engage with a contractor, local service contractor, and says, tell you what, you'll get these reports. If it's over X gallons or it has a broken flapper, you can come to my property for $100, go fix it, pick a number. So really a great way to get an interactive system. The other type of reports we call alarms. And this is a little different. All right, now I got real high usage. We set a threshold based on what the owner wants. Some, hundreds of gallons in an hour. And wait a second, that's not just a flapper valve. Text me right away, send me an email, I want to go fix that. Or if water's been running more than 60 minutes at a time, another type of leak, let's go fix it. So again, the first one was a report, this is more of an alarm. But again, everything we've talked about has been down the drain, down the toilet, down the shower, down the sink. The next area is what we call flood detection. And this is where you put those little sensors at the end of the cable on the floor, maybe by a washer and dryer or around a hot water heater or at the main point of entry. And if there's a leak, it detects it, sends an alarm. All this goes wirelessly, which we'll talk about next. And you now know it's a bigger deal. And we'll show you on the screen later how we can actually also remotely shut off the water. So this is a typical leak sensor on the floor that would give you an alarm, different than it was going down the toilet. But that's just one space, right? So water has to be in contact with that little device. The other type of leak sensor is a rope sensor. This is about a 10-foot rope on the edge of there that you could wrap all the way around the hot water heater, or maybe wrap around some pipes or in a certain area that you're concerned with, and send the same type of leak detection. So again, a little different type of scenario with this here. This is really about floods. And the next thing is what we call a point of entry shutoff valve. So this is a valve that can go on hot water heater, the main entry point into the apartment, on a washing machine. And if you think about it, what we'll say is, hey, we got a message from the flood sensor, goes up into our software, and it says we have a leak. We have lots of gallons on the water, on the ground. And we can go ahead and the system can automatically either send a text to the owner and says, what do you want to do? Or in most cases, they say, you know what, if you see this and no one's in the apartment, go ahead and shut it off. And this device will remotely shut off that valve to try to protect the property. And in apartment buildings, floods are a major issue. It's never the guy's apartment that gets flooded. Never the guy on the 10th floor whose apartment gets flooded. Yeah, he has some wet carpets. It's the 5 floors below that hit their walls, hit their paintings, hit whatever. That becomes a bigger issue. So this is a truly unique way to do that, where you can not only monitor it for leaks down the drain, wasted water, look at flood detection, alarming it, and now you can do remote shut off. It pulls all that together into one solution. So I'll stop here, and in the next session we'll talk about the wireless way to communicate. But any questions you'd like to ask?
Yes, we do have a couple.
Sure.
Trying to pull it up here. The screen keeps going off and on. It looks like Jerry did answer the question, but what is the largest size of remote shutoff available currently?
So let's see how good we guessed it. We go 3/4 inch, inch and a half. If we go above that, there is we're not really set up to go distribute those, but there is some solutions that we can get into a bigger shutoff valve. But our main sweet spot is 3/4 inch to 1.5 inches.
Okay, and then later on, we just want to make sure that we cover, we talk about the hot water meters and hot water return and how that can be done with sub-metering in California, and then also discussing in Nevada, because that is a question that gets asked a lot. So we do want to focus on the hot water returns in a sub-metered unit before we end the presentation today.
Okay, sounds good. All right, why don't we continue on? We'll hit those at the end there. Sounds good. All right. All right, so let's talk just a few minutes on the wireless side. So think about what we said before. We had point of use meters that were connected, that have a built-in radio. We have point of entry meters that were connected to that black box. All of those and all those leak sensors and flood sensors all talk on a wireless solution. We have a Zigbee wireless and LoRa wireless, and we're going to focus on the LoRa wireless solution because that's really where the future is at. This is what's called a 900 megahertz solution. Don't need to worry about that, but what you got to understand is in an apartment building, there's not one Wi-Fi network for the whole building. Each tenant has their own. So Wi-Fi doesn't work in apartments. An owner is not going to track 100 different passwords. So our solution, and all the companies that do this type of thing, have one wireless solution that kind of covers the whole property. It's independent of the Wi-Fi and strictly for the meter. Right? What's unique here is this is one of the strongest technologies called LoRa or WAN wireless. And if you're in a garden style apartment where you have 2-3 story apartments, you know, maybe 20 buildings across a 30 acre, 70 acre property, you put our gateway, which is the main box, we'll show you on the next slide, in the middle of the apartment complex, in the property manager's office or in the clubhouse, it'll cover the entire property for reading those meters wirelessly without any kind of repeaters. So strictly put the meters in with the pulse counter, back to this gateway. If you're doing a high rise, you can do a 30-story high rise with one gateway. And if it's bigger than 30 stories, we throw in another gateway. They're not expensive. That's not where the cost is at. But really makes it an easy installation. We've been very pleased. This system, which we've been, really using the last year or so, we have well over 5,000 of these in 50, 60 properties throughout the United States. The majority of what we've been using is what's called the Zigbee solution. That's where we have those 100,000 out there. But this is truly kind of the next phase of wireless. So on this graph, what you can look at, this is pretending we got a 4-story apartment building. Apartment 4 has one hot meter, one cold meter, tied into a pulse counter, the wireless pulse counter, and that talks directly down to the gateway. And all these pulse counters talking directly to the gateway. Remember, this gateway, this pulse counter, has what's called a 10-year battery life. Because the hard part about apartments is getting in. So you can't be on 2-3 years, and it's usually not convenient to put an electrical outlet where water's running. So everyone uses these battery powered. Ours is really the longest in the industry at 10 years. brings the data back to the gateway in the manager's office. From there, it goes to our cloud server, H2O Degree Cloud. We collect that data, and now we go present it. We're going to send it to the property manager in data for billing or leak detection reports, or to the maintenance team. We can send it to the accounting department if we want. We send it to those meter reading companies, those RBCs, read, bill, and collect, third-party companies that are going to take that meter data and turn it into a bill. You can make it available to the tenants. Most landlords don't. That's just going to create questions and havoc. So, but lots of ways to share it. I also want to point out at this point that we also can come out of the gateway and go into a building automation system. So we can come out of our gateway in Modbus and feed that into a building automation system from Honeywell, Siemens, you name it, simultaneously. So in apartments, you kind of see that in some of your bigger properties, some of the newer high rises, over whatever, 20, 30 stories will have some kind of BMS system that they might want to tie into. So keep that in mind. That is available. And this is what we're talking about. This is what the gateway looks like. It's about, 10 inches by 12 inches. In there's the gateway. It has an outlet and has one cord that gets into the internet. We like to be on the building's internet. We don't want our own line. If the building's internet goes down and people can't do their work, or more importantly, can't check fantasy football scores or check Facebook, they're going to get it fixed pretty quickly. If we're on our own network, we're kind of screwed. So we like to be on the network. If the property doesn't have internet, some of the affordable housing properties we do have no internet there, no clubhouse or anything like that. Or the IT department of the big building says you're not being on my network, we'll use the cell modem just as easily. So we do both. And a lot of times we might start at the property in new construction with a cell modem because there's not internet. So as you're going through installing these meters, you still don't have internet. We can see that the meter's been installed right and the wireless communication is working, and then switch to the landline or to the Ethernet line at the property. Hopefully that makes sense. You got the two pulse counters, 1 channel, 2 channel. And when I say 2 channel, that could be for 1 hot water meter, 1 electric meter. It could be 1 hot water meter, 1 cold water meter, either combination. And we also have one for encoded register, which is another type of water meter we've dealt with. All those pulse counters can talk to other types of meters, electric, gas, BTUs. So what I want you to leave this presentation from is to think about H2O Degree, think about Osborne for any of your water metering needs, but don't be afraid of electric and gas, right? Don't be afraid of, hey, I just need a meter for irrigation or for makeup water. We have those solutions and we can talk to all those meters. Just for a minute on thermostats, we sell a thermostat that can go into each apartment, but the owner controls it. Yes, he gives the tenant stability to go from 68 to 74 degrees, but not above that. They set that in through the software. They can have it set back at night. If it's in student housing, we might set up a system that's at its normal mode, and then we have a spring break mode and summertime mode that automatically turns it off. I have 4 kids, they're all in college or out of college. There's no way they went back when they left for the semester break to turn down the air conditioning. I know that. This allows that to happen, where they just do it remotely. The key here is for every degree that a owner can save in heating and air conditioning, it's over 2% of their electric bill can come off. It's a huge savings. Lots of savings here. You're going to save 10 to 20%, 2-3 year type payback. And a full software package to do that. So I just want to go over real quick a couple properties and kind of help bring it together, and then we'll answer the questions. So one of our larger properties is in Queens, New York. It's a 4,600 unit apartment complex built in the 50s, give or take. And it's a retrofit. And what they did there is they said, okay, this property is a mix of market rate and affordable housing, and we want to get a lot of it moved to market rate as possible. And they had that point of use, 3-4 meters in each apartment, toilet, shower, sink, kind of monitoring. And what they did there is they put in all the wireless infrastructure first, and they knew that about 20% of the tenants move out every year. So as the tenants moved out, they put in the meters, And then the new tenant came in and they were now being charged for the work. Before it used to be included, now they're being billed for the work. Huge payback, like I said, 1 to 2 years for this property owner in a retrofit type solution. This is a property down in San Diego, brand new construction with Lennar, one of the larger builders, 24 stories. This was a dual point of entry, one hot, one cold. They had a central facility for hot water for each apartment. We put in one cold water meter, one hot water meter into one of those pulse counters, all on the LoRa network. This was driven. I think they would have done it anyway, but definitely to be in compliance with Senate Bill 7, they did it this way, right? Put in the sub-meters. So this is a traditional example. And what we're seeing, besides the new construction, now you got retrofit that are in the same marketplace next to a bunch of new construction properties. And they're looking at it and the tenants are saying, well, do I move into this new apartment that charges rent plus utilities for $2,000? Or do I go to this retrofit that charges, $2,200, which includes utilities? Most people think they can save on their own, and it now becomes a marketing play. And also, the people that are putting in the sub-meters also are saying, hey, come to my green building. This is a traditional garden-style apartment. You can see, 30 buildings across a 30-acre property. 1 meter per apartment, because they have a hot water heater in each apartment. Pretty standard type of application. Again, the gateway is in the clubhouse in the center and reads the entire property. So with that, I'm going to kind of skip this one. And let's open it up to questions for myself or Jerry. And again, just want to thank you for your time and Osborne for hosting. But let's address some questions if anyone's got them. Ashley, any questions?
All of the questions have been answered at this time. If there's any additional questions, please feel free to send them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get them answered now.
See that, Don? You did such a great job.
Yeah. Did you had one question you wanted, we were going to save to the end? You want Jerry to address that, or was that already addressed in the question?
Yeah, Jerry, if you can address to the group the hot water meters, hot water returns. It's definitely a question that's asked now with submetering into a multifamily unit, and the hot water returns used to pick up kitchen sinks and a lot of plumbing applications. But with the submetering, that the hot water returns are typically just dead hot water returns going back to a distribution floor. So there's a lot of questions about being able to integrate submetering at the kitchen sink to be able to allow to pick up those fixtures on those hot water returns. Where are we in that process? What can be done? Is there anything that you guys are doing to push to get individual submeters approved through weights and measures? If you can just elaborate on what you guys are doing at this point in time.
Just so I completely understand, we're talking about a hot water return that's plumbed back from the kitchen sink?
No, so typically your pressure zone risers would go up to a unit. You'd have your hot and your cold water meters going into the unit, and then at the top of a distribution floor, the hot water return would go down all the way back down to a lower distribution floor and would be picking up kitchen sinks. But now with submetering and with weights and measures, is there the capability of having another submeter device for the kitchen sink or fixtures that the hot water return is picking up? Because if we can't, then right now those hot water return lines are basically just risers going back to a distribution floor, not picking up fixtures.
Yeah, no, I would love to see kind of an example of one of those designs, just so I'm 100% clear. But, talking earlier with the example of what we have done with returns is that it's been kind of, to that, circulated return that's directly off of the supply, right? Kind of, it's usually been a takeoff before the hot water meter. right? So the return is happening kind of right at the entry of the apartment unit, or in other applications, it's been where the services come in farther to the apartment unit and let's say is in mechanical closet on the other side of the apartment, and the return is then going back into the system. And that's where we have the 3-meter solution that would be in a mechanical closet, right? So the domestic cold, domestic hot water supply, domestic hot water return, where then, you know, we're subtracting out the return gallons from the supply. But it sounds like this is a little bit different, being that you have fixtures picked up on the return. So I would just like to maybe understand that. So if anyone could maybe provide a example of that design, I'd be happy to take a look and see what kind of solution that we could provide according exactly to the design.
I'll do is I'll give you examples of those designs so we can elaborate a response, and we'll email it out to everybody that attended the webinar. That way we're not taking time. There is another question on submeters. Can they be either horizontal or vertically installed? Or is there a specific way that you want to see them installed in the application?
Right, so most submeters are required to be installed horizontal. There are a few submeters that are allowed, and I just want to be very clear here. California, I'm now going to talk to everyone in California. In California, the majority of submeters are approved only for horizontal installations. There are few submeters that are allowed to be installed vertically. Unfortunately, none of those meters are approved and are for a domestic hot water service. The only meters that are approved for vertical installations in California are a domestic cold water meter only. Now, for the Nevada attendees, have fun. Do what you want. Any of our meters that we have in our catalog can be installed both horizontally or vertically, right? Pertaining to the specific model, right? But I think, you know, out of all of our models that we carry, only one has to be installed horizontal. The others can be installed horizontal or vertical. And so I know that poses definitely some design challenges in California when you're not able to install a water submeter vertically.
So the manufacturer is very comfortable with that meter being horizontal or vertically, but California has specific rules, like Jerry said. And that's also where that remote display comes in, because if it's horizontal and it's up in the ceiling, you can't see the display. So they want to have a remote display down. Hopefully that answers that question. And we take all this into consideration when we're either developing, you know, drawings or doing takeoffs. We you know, highlight those issues for you. So we're putting in the meters that are approved and give you guidance with that. Any other questions?
I do want to, so one thing I just want to double back maybe to the vertical meter installation. So specifically, the meters have to be installed horizontal. There are plumbing fittings that are in existence called meter setters, which would allow a service to be vertical, but have the water meter installed horizontal. And, you know, we can provide examples of what those meter setters look like, especially if, you know, your design is forced to have a service vertical, but, you know, now you're held to the requirement that the meter has to be horizontal, right? So how do we get past that challenge? So, you know, there are fittings that are available out in the market to address that, so we can help you, you know, point you into the direction of those.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions?
We are out of questions at this time.
Right.
And if anybody does have questions that weren't answered or has any additional questions that they would like clarified, please feel free to email them to Brian or myself. and we will make sure that the questions get answered by H2O Degree, by either Don or Jerry, and we'll circle back and get those responses to you. And as I said, I will get you guys the example of the hot water return application for California once I sidebar this with Jerry. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much for joining today. Thank you, Don and Jerry. And
Thank you for the invite and everyone's time on the call. Appreciate it.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.